Hello everyone and welcome to the fourth part of the course. On this part we'll move this other character. Previously we've seen how to do it with the first one, this one here. And now we'll follow the same procedure so it's clearer with this fish here. And we'll use a linked spine so the fish can move around the scene. So in order to do this, first, we have to put all objects of this model into one group so we don't get confused with so many of them. We'll rename these to joints and we'll see where is everything. Here we have the first model. So we're going to group all of these and we'll rename it to model 1, for example. So we can work with this separately. Okay, now we have this one here. You know you can activate subdivision surface anytime. But for now, we'll disable it. So we're going to go through the same procedure, okay? Remember, from a comfortable view, like for example, the side view, we click on character, then join tool, and now while holding the control key we start creating joints. Okay, with the last model we created short bones, but we can create longer ones. The longer they are, the less segments and articulations we'll be able to use to animate the model. Okay, so this depends on how you do it or how many bones you create in the model. It will be more or less flexible. So we start creating the joints, okay? Okay, now as you remember, we can get this out of the group so we don't get confused for now. And we can right click on the first joint and put on an IK character tag. This IK tag will have to be activated, and once we've activated it, we'll see that we can edit on other values such as forces, like we can set gravity to 0, okay? Good. We have to activate the tag and then navigate to tag, and we drag and drop the last joint into end. Okay, so this way, as you see, we've created this green line. We hit play and we can see the bone responds to the physics laws now. What we do next is we set gravity to 0. This way we keep the spline straight and doesn't fall down. Okay? Good. Now, as you know, we have to create a cube the size of the fish. We use the different views like before to adjust the cube to it. Not too tight. We should give some air on the sides. All right, and that's it. Now we select the cube and we set more segments on it so it can bend properly when it moves. Then we make it an editable object. And after that, we select the cube and the joints we just created for this model. And as you remember, we click on character, commands, bind. So now the link is created and so is the skin. We create a null object now and move this model inside the null object. And now remember, we used a mesh deformer which will position above the fish inside the null. Then we drag and drop the cube we created on cages and hit initialized. Now, when we move the first joint, the fish's skeleton moves perfectly, you see? Okay. The next step, if you remember, was to put the vibration tag on it so it automates the movement. So we'll create a null object and we'll get the joints inside it. We'll rename it to joints. And now right click on it. Cinema 4D tags and vibrate, right? Now we check these two boxes, regular pulse and enable rotation, and we set a number on x-axis amplitude and the frequency. Now if we hit play, now we can already see it moving. We can hide the box from here. Oops, sorry. From here. Okay? And we can see how this works. Okay. Now in amplitude, as you remember, we can take this value down to 20 and the frequency, if necessary, down to 1.5. See? And now in the IK tag, we can manage the strength and we can decrease it if we need to. All right? On the other hand, if we tweak these parameters here, we would be tampering with the axis. I mean, we'll make the model move on the y-axis and on the z-axis. In this case, it's not necessary. That's why we leave it on 0. But if we increase it, obviously we see that it moves on the y-axis. We can leave it in 1, so it's a subtle movement. All right, now we're going to create the spline we talked about before. We can do this from here. We select the pen tool and we start a path. Like this, something simple, okay? Like this, for example, okay? So we switch to perspective view, and you can raise or lower some of the points if you like, at your judgment. Okay, now what we have to do is right-click on the joint null object, and under Cinema 4D tags, we click on Align to Spline. All right? Now we drag this spline into spline path, and we automatically link the fish at the beginning of this tag. Here we have the position from 0 to 100, which is the end of the spline. This is what we're going to animate. If we check the tangential box, we can set the orientation of the fish on the spline in addition to its position. In this case, by doing this, we've inverted the position. See? Now 100 is the starting position and 0 the ending. To solve this, we just set the position to 100, like this. Now, as you can see, let's hit play for a moment. There it is. As you can see, now the fish is oriented like the spline is, besides having the same position. If we hadn't activated the tangential option, the fish would still follow the spline, but it wouldn't be necessarily oriented in the same direction. Now we set position to 100, set a keyframe, and now move to 260, set the position to 0, and set another keyframe. Okay? Let's zoom out and see exactly the path it follows. Okay? Let's take a look. This way, if we also set a good camera, for example, here, and clicking here, we get into the camera, we position it over here, and we can see how the model moves and gets closer. See? Let's click display, garage shading. And if you think it goes too fast, we can go to position. Once we've activated this, we can see the keyframes in the timeline. And we can grab the final keyframe and move it forward to 300. This way, the movement slows down. It starts here and goes down the path. If we duplicate the scene, if we duplicate the model now and we slightly alter the spline, we will get another fish, which would result in an interesting animation using both elements. What I recommend here is that you open the texture on Photoshop and just go to Image, Adjustments, Replace Color, and now we can use the eyedropper tool to select the yellow color and change it to a slightly different color, okay? For example, we can set it to this orange. Now we save this texture and then we just duplicate the elements, which will create a different fish. And we change the spline so we have two elements. So let's go to frame 0. We have the old model here. Let's select all the elements and now Control C, Control V. Okay. And now let's see if we can move it. For example, here. You can see now we have two identical copies, right? Well, now we could just select this spline and change the path, or even make a new one and then link that new spline to the tag. So now let's just select the pen tool and create a new spline. Okay. Something like this, for example. Okay, now we get here, and obviously we have to drag this spline into spline path. Now remember, this will work differently. So let's erase the keyframes. We can select them like this and then just hit delete. This one too. We set position to 0. Okay, so in this case, we see the position is correct. Position 0 starts here. So it's like before. It's changed, so we just set position to 100. We go to the first frame. Click here in order to create a keyframe. And now we go to the last frame, set position to 0, and create another keyframe. Now they pass beside one another, and now what I was saying is that we can duplicate this material, and if we saved a copy of this one here, let's type in color 2. Let's save. Now in Cinema 4D, here in color, we can load this new material. Here it is. Let's click yes. And now we select the model. And drag this material. That's how we change color on the model. There it is. Okay. Sometimes you have to hit the go to start button for everything to get into place, but don't worry about that, okay? Notice how one is yellow and the other one is orange. Right now we could get a completely finished scene. We could just maybe put on some background, some lights, or we could just export this video as an image sequence and then modify the scene using After Effects. All right? See how accurate the fish movement is? I'd like to show you a finished example so you get an idea of how we could finish this scene. All right, in this example you are seeing now, as you see, the fishes are different, though quite similar. I did this before doing the course to prepare for it. So what you can see here is exactly the same. Two models with different colors, like in the course. And what we'll do now is extract the characters without the background, and then create the background in post-production. Okay? The path you set in the spline will determine the way in which the fishes move. In this case, as you see, they start from here and travel the same way. In our case, our fishes cross paths. Okay? We can set the camera at some place like this, for example, so when they pass in front of it, they cross with each other. Okay? So for this, we'll go to Render Settings, and here we select the size. I recommend not to choose a very high resolution because it will take too much to render all the images. Now in Format, we select PNG, and we set a file name, and we save it inside a folder we create for it because it will be saved as an image sequence. Okay? Then we check alpha channel, and obviously we create a light or a sky, whatever you see fit. If you're doing a more aquatic scene, you may want to use a bluer light. So we can set a light here, which will set to a bluish tone. We'll pump up the intensity. We can duplicate it, holding Control. Decrease intensity. In this case, as you see, we still have to decrease a bit more the intensity. And the other one as well. Turn down the intensity. We can even create a third source of light around here with a more yellow tone. Okay. Remember that if we move the camera while this is enabled, we'll be constantly moving the camera. So if we click here to disable the camera view, we can work easily and then click again and go back to it, okay? And if we right click on the camera, we can put a protection tag on it so it won't move. Good. I think it's fine like this. Now, as I was saying, after we've solved all of these, we select a folder, PNG file type, enable alpha channel. We can enable the anti-aliasing option. In this case, we set it to geometry. And in output, we set the size of the video and the frames from 0 to 300. Okay? And that's about it. Click render. Good. So here we're seeing the process, okay? And as you can see, the animation was saved with a black background, which is actually transparent, okay? All right. So now what you have to do when you have saved all these, as you see, it will be fast because the fish are far away. The closer the models, the longer it will take. It also depends on the type of lights, if it's an aerial light or not. We've used the simplest Omni lights for it to go faster. So what we have to get out of these in the end are all these images here with a transparent background, okay? So now we're going to go back to the scene, and before the next video, I want you to get a good shot and a good spline. I mean, let's get out of the camera for a moment. Okay, and we're going to set the scene very nicely. If you create a spline, do it as you like. Make the fish follow the path you like. You can put a rock around the scene. Okay, in short, what we really need is just the fish. But if you want to add details to the scene in this step, you can do so. The same with the lights. You can set 2 or 3 of them. And remember that if you choose aerial lights, everything will go a bit slower. Okay? So that's it. Now we carry on with all these, and in the next video, we'll get all the images together in one video. So see you in a bit.